Sensationally silver, because you are.
Welcome, everyone, to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age, people who are going to bring you information, inspiration, and validation. Join us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age. My guest today is so very extraordinary that I've asked him to come back. Dr. David Cumes, who is a physician and he's also a shaman. And today we're going to be talking about making friends with your death, which sounds a little glum, but you know, for most of us at this point in life, this is the next big event. So, Dr. Cumes and I, and all of you who are here with us, we're going to be looking at that together. Welcome, Dr. Cumes. How do you feel about talking about this topic today?
It's one of my favorite topics, actually, and I often give a talk on it, and it's actually really well received because it's really important because kind of that's where all the work that I did really began. It's really at the end of the day, it's all about death and how to prepare for death and how to have a good death and a good next life.
So, I guess one way of looking at it would be to see our entire life, however long it lasts, as a journey toward letting go at the end.
It's a journey towards letting go at the ending, being ready in terms of putting your karma in order so that then death is a pleasant experience. I think there's a Native American saying that says, when you were born, everybody laughed and you cried. Be sure that when you die, everybody cries and you're laughing. So I want to be laughing when I die. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. Or maybe everybody laughing, in some,
Hopefully they'll all be laughing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know people are thinking, now, wait a minute. I know how awful and painful and horrible that process of leaving the body can be. So let's talk about that. Let's not pretend that that can't be a possibility.
Well, if you're ready, it shouldn't be, the Kabbalists say it shouldn't be anything more than a bee sting. And if you are prepared for death, there are a number of different parts to it. There's preparation, and nobody prepares, it's like nobody would take an amazing journey to some unknown place in outer Mongolia without doing a lot of research. But most people are fearful of death, even if they don't say so, and they just don't want to, they're in denial, they don't want to deal with it. And then eventually when it comes, they're terrified. And then it's difficult for them and they try to hang on. And the more you hang on and the more you try to not leave, the more unpleasant your transition is going to be. So there are a number of things that, I think that are sort of basic things to be ready for, is that have your karma in order, uh, clean the slate, forgive anybody who needs to be forgiven, ask forgiveness if, if that's required, don't, and release anybody from any promises or anything else they made, so that there's no unfinished business, no skeletons in the closet. And then, from what I've understood in my work that I've done, and also from Buddhism, is you have to go into sort of an existential free fall without any fear, without any attachment, no attachment to job or people or things or anything like that, and without any fear, and just go into the sort of state where you let go and you go to the place that you deserve. Now, the Tibetans read the Book of the Dead for 49 days because they feel the spirit hangs around the earth plane for 49 days. And this is to assist them in transitioning to the other side, to the astral, where they'll reconcile with their karma, go through a transition phase, then be reincarnated. Or if they've done it right, they don't have to reincarnate. They can go to the pure land of Buddhism and come back only if they choose to come back. So that's kind of what I would like to do. I had a dream long ago, and I started this journey. I get these sort of messages in my dreams that say, "Don't let me take this trip again." So, the body is really just a vehicle for us to transition. And we are tested according to how responsibly we use our sensory body. That's called samsara in Buddhism, the continual cycle of death, rebirth, till we get it right. We come back again and again. I think you're an old soul, so you and I have been around many, many times. And maybe now's the time, at least for me, to try and see that I've got it right. So that means fulfilling your karma, which has, certain prerequisites, like fulfill your destiny. What's your task that you were given by the Creator? Do no harm. Try and heal the planet. Subordinate your ego to your higher self. Love people not as a sentiment or an emotion, but as a commitment, and have joy. We're supposed to be here to enjoy ourselves, but we have to enjoy ourselves responsibly. But Zorba the Greek. I know many of the younger folks have never have you watched the movie
What movie?
The Greek?
Oh,
Yeah.
Zorba the Greek. I have not.
It's a brilliant movie. It must be 30 years old, but Zorba enjoys the whole catastrophe of life, and he doesn't do any harm along the way. I wouldn't say he's the most, a moral, spiritually moral person, but he helps people in whatever he does. Whether he gets drunk, he does it well. Whether he has sex, he does it well. Enjoys it to the full. That's the kind of model I think, the creator appreciates.
Yeah. I want to back up a little bit and talk a bit about why we don't like to think about our own death. I'm assuming that there's a kind of a superstition that if I think about this too much, I'm actually bringing it on, and I don't want to do that. So I just won't look that way. I'll look the other way all the time. What do you think? What causes us to avoid facing something that is more inevitable than anything else in life, leaving that body?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest fear people have, especially those who say you only live once. I'm just going to enjoy it as much as I can. And maybe they enjoy it irresponsibly because they don't feel they'll be accountable for anything. And what happens when you are starting to transition, is my belief, is that you sort of start to see a kind of a rerun of your life and all the things that you may have done. And then those are the guys who are often terribly fearful. They don't want to die because they know there's something coming at the end of all this. And that's the fear. I think the problem is most people just put it off and they don't want to talk about death or do anything. And it's a subconscious fear they don't want to, they don't want to deal with. But there are a lot of people who have a morbid fear of death. And in a graph in the 1960s, he gave people LSD, and he found that after that, they all lost their fear of death because they were able to see the other realities that are out there. The Zohar talks about us living in a 1% world. Most people living in a 1% world where there's another 99% out there. When you have a near-death experience or you take some kind of a psychedelic that, in a positive way, a mind-altering substance, you see other realities and you get to realize that this is not what it's all about. This is just a tiny part of our life. We're going to do it again. We've done it many, many times. And we come back into a sentient body, which is a blessing. It's a gift. When we leave, the soul moves on, but we are no longer confined to the body. We can't enjoy taste or enjoy orgasm or see things or hear things. They're all done intuitively. But it has a lot of power being on the other side. There are lots of things you can do on the other side you cannot do here, being unconfined to space and time. Now the FDA, they're so backward, excuse my profession, but the FDA have cleared psilocybin magic mushrooms for the use in severe depression, severe anxiety, things that have defied the best of Western medicine. Those are the people they do. And these people normally have a morbid fear of death. And they find that one of the benefits is they lose their fear of death. So in a way, my journey started because I was a skeptical left brain doctor. And I remember the first time I went to see a psychic who channeled a spirit called Indira. And I sort of knew about her because I've heard about her being very powerful. And I was skeptical. But she said to me something very important. She said, "You have no parachute." He said, "One day you're going to have to jump out of the plane and you don't have a parachute. You have nothing to hang on to. You need to start getting your parachute." So that I took, coming from some spirit who spoke, in a different accent, the woman was channeling it. And that I really took that to heart. So I think the first thing I did is I started to research near-death experiences to see what those guys, discovered. There was a lot of research by Moody and others about that. It's been well written. You probably read it yourself. But a few things struck me was that they went through this tunnel, they broke into this light. That's the kind of light that the Talmud talks about, and the ancestors talk about. That's the light that's we are duty bound to try and find. But they break into this light of unconditional love, which feels like total bliss. And they don't want to come back. They're happy to be there. But then they are stopped, usually an ancestor or a gate or a river or a voice or a lake, and it says, no, it's not your time, you need to go back. And they never forget that experience. Maybe something like, Groff and somebody has an LSD experience, that imprints in your mind, totally. And these people usually go on a spiritual journey because they know they have a mission. They don't go back to make more money, they go back to help people. So I think that's where I started, and I started to realize. And if you talk to scientists or doctors, and I'm sure some of your audiences have read Ibn Alexander's book, Proof of Heaven. He was a naysayer. He didn't believe there was any life after death till he had his own near-death experience. There's such good evidence because what will happen is the people who go through that experience, they'll go into the waiting room and they'll see their loved ones there, and they can relate exactly the conversation they heard. So how does that happen unless you're going out of body? The doctors would say, no, that's just a chemical aberration in your brain. There was one researcher, which is very interesting, who went around talking to all these people in the ICU that had had the experience. And the one person said when they went out of their body, out of the hospital to the other side, they saw a sneaker on the ledge of the second floor. And the researcher went and he looked, and there was a sneaker. There was no way she could have known about that. So that's kind of what impressed me. And then I started to go on my own little journey, going back to South Africa. I think we've talked about that, and with the Bushmen, because they have what's called the little death experience, where they actually go into the spirit world voluntarily and negotiate with the spirits for the health of their clan and know where to hunt and who to heal. And it's called the little death because it is a little death. The only difference is they don't disconnect from the silver cord that keeps the body connected to the soul. Every now and then, the younger ones do separate from that, and then they really do die. So it's because they're very advanced, spirits, those people. So I think that I don't know if that explains your question, but that's what struck me.
In the 70s, I went to a conference here in Santa Barbara on death and dying. And Dr. Groff was there, and I believe they were married at the time. Joan Halifax, they were
Yes.
partners, certainly. And she was an anthropologist, and she talked a lot about exactly what you're describing. And she's because she had traveled and been involved with many, many different cultures and tribes and all of that. She said the experience was the same no matter what someone's
Mhm.
religious background was, whatever that is, their experience on through that near death experience, they were virtually identical. I mean, not
Mhm.
all the details, but the travel, the journey down that tunnel, the light, whatever the message was that they got. So it makes kind of a case for saying there is another side, and it's not so influenced by what we think we believe as simply what that transition involves.
Mhm. Correct. It's universal. Everybody will have a slightly different version of it, but like you said, the basic principles will be the same. And the same is true. Now, the ancestors say there are just as many paths in death as there are in life. So that, in terms of what really happens then, say you transition over, if you're not ready and you're too attached, you could become earthbound. If you're attached to your job or your loved ones or things, you may not see the light, you may not hear the ancestors calling you home, and therefore you can become earthbound and not even know about it. There are lots of earthbound spirits that haven't transitioned over the veil between the worlds, and then the trajectory of their soul is impaired, And those have to be treated. That's some of the work that I do with, earthbound spirits who've had a traumatic or confused or a sudden death. They're not ready, or an attached death. It's very good in the terms of when you're going to transition, is to have some kind of a sacred mantra in your mind, so that you don't get the fear that you're going to have, initially, and you're not ready for death. I remember reading that Gandhi was chanting the name of God when he was shot, Ram, Ram, Ram. Something like that where you can hold on to and not sort of go into the mind trip about fear and all the rest of it, which might make for an inconvenient death and maybe even become earthbound. And then when you go across the veil, which is usually in 30 days, or if you're a Tibetan Buddhist, 49, they're reading the book to the dead spirit around the body to help them transition and that they don't become earthbound. They go to the right vibration.
This is, well, it's just a dimension that I know about because my career was always in the field of addiction.
Mhm.
And very often that active addiction can contribute to that earthbound state, that
Mhm.
that desperate hunger for whatever it is. And then there's the attachment to somebody who's here who may have a problem in that area as a likely place to kind of vicariously get that fed. And I'm going to tell a little story that I just love this story. I knew a woman who had a client. She was a rolfer and she had a client, and he was an alcoholic who was recovering. And he said he couldn't stop hearing this voice that was telling him to drink all the time. And he said, he told his sponsor in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous about this. And his sponsor said, the next time you hear that voice, I want you to say your name, say, hi, I'm so and so, and I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'd like to invite you to a meeting.
Mhm.
It happened. He never heard that voice again.
Yeah.
And, it makes me think about what you're saying about cleaning up the karma, releasing those resentments, and making amends when we need to make amends, reconciling when we possibly can, or at least have the willingness to do that. It seems like that's a very important part of the preparation for leaving the body, and that it can help so much to make that transition easier, even if that's not the motive. The motive is simply to clean things up. I don't want to go out of here with all that hanging on me. I mean, that's how I see it, but rather have it clean so that exit can be clean too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think that's the biggest thing that what you mentioned is just clean the slate. Don't have anything that's, going to hamper your transition or hamper your karma, because what I've learned from the ancestors, the biggest thing I learned in my initiation was forgiveness. Africans have the amazing ability to forgive, They don't seem to want to hang on to any grudges or resentment. But a lot of the work that I did with, when I was initiating with my mentor, was seeing people who were looking for forgiveness. The dead often haunt the living because they've abused them, and it's up to the living to forgive them. Now, if you look at the Bible, it says one of the commandments is honor your mother and father, and it's your grandmothers and grandfathers. Why? Because they gave you live birth. We wouldn't be here if not for them. It doesn't say like them. It doesn't say love them. It doesn't even say reconcile with them or have anything to do with them. But we're obligated to forgive them, because if we forgive them, we release them from that karmic sin. That doesn't release them from anything else. But that's why the dead sometimes haunt the living, because they're faced with terrible karma, having to come back and do that whole thing again. The alcoholic you're talking about, you know, can come back in a better way his next time around if he's been forgiven, as opposed to if there's been a grudge. So those are spirits that are hanging around from your blood root, but there are other intrusive spirits that, that's a different story. You don't have to forgive them, but it's a good idea to forgive, because forgiveness is healthful. It's more important for the one doing the forgiving than even the one who's forgiven. Bumps up your T cells, it bumps up your immune system. They've shown that AIDS patients who forgave the person who gave them the virus do much better, live longer, have higher T cells than those who are holding on to the grudge.
So these measures that we need to address or take, they're not just for preparing us for letting go of this lifetime, but they also make for a better life while we're here.
Correct. Yeah.
And certainly a happier life if we're not carrying around those resentments, which are so heavy, such
Yeah.
heavy things. I'm going to tell another alcoholic story because that's my field. That's what I happen to know about.
Hmm.
Um, so I I know I knew another woman who was a psychic, and her father was an alcoholic, and he died of it. And she said that it was her belief that when people chose to incarnate with the disease of alcoholism in this era, when there is a solution in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's so effective when people really work that program, that people choose to come in as an alcoholic because they have a chance to clean up a great deal of karma in one lifetime. And if you think about how that program works, and most people don't really know how it works if they're not going to meetings and recovering, but it involves doing exactly the things that you're talking about, David, making amends, letting go of the resentments, cleaning it all up. And also, the key thing is turning one's will and one's life over to the care of God as that person understands God. Now, if you're doing that every single day, in order to save your own life, because you've got this terminal disease that's going to kill you if you don't begin to recover from it, that's going to clean up a lot of karma. I mean, it's magical if you think about it. And here comes that better life that finally makes staying sober far, far more attractive than pushing everything away with a drink or a drug. So it's it is kind of magical how these things work and how the solution is the same no matter where you live in the whole world. Same kinds of things. It's in pretty much every body of spiritual literature, no matter what the religion is or whatever. Forgive, let go, make amends, trust God, all of that. So, pretty basic message. Not easy, but simple.
Hmm.
Very simple.
Yeah, it's like reincarnating into a Buddhist monastery, I suppose. The same technology, but somewhat different. I remember, I remember a patient that I saw one time. I didn't really remember who he was or what he did, anything. And then about 5 years later, I got a letter with a check for $5. And he said, I never paid my copay, and I'm now with AA, and I'm here's the $5 I never gave you. I mean, that's how important it is, because it goes down to those little things and not just the big things, the little things as well.
Yeah. What did they say? God is in the details.
Yeah.
Well,
Hmm.
God's kind of in everything. If
Yeah.
you believe in that, then it's everywhere and everything.
Hmm.
Well, David, these
Um,
these things that you're describing are not the usual experiences that most of us in this culture have.
yeah.
And maybe we don't go seeking for those either, as you have with your own roots in South Africa and all of that exposure and that attraction to that. But I'm assuming that we can all trust that our own path in our own life, if it seems much more mundane or whatever, it still has those invitations to us to open the doors to a wider understanding and experience of what it is to be human and to not run from any of it.
Hmm.
I'm not talking about being a hedonist at all. I'm just saying we get messages, we get hints that these things are important to us, and they come again and again. And that way is always opening for us. Or we can be closing the doors. As the doors are opening, we can be slamming them shut, or we can be saying, all right, I want to see what that's like. I want to see what it's like to make peace with this parent that I've always despised and resented. I want to see what it's like to let go of some of the ideas that I hold so tightly and consider that maybe there's another way of looking at things. And all of that opens us and prepares us, I'm assuming, for more acceptance of everything, everybody, including that transition. Does that sound
No,
reasonable?
makes perfect sense. We all have, the path of a Sangoma, and not just Sangomas, but other people in that, in that genre, is helping other people. But everybody is here and can help themselves. So everybody is capable of getting the messages they need for what they need to do. Like you said, the clues along the way. The Sangoma's path is different. You get the messages for other people, so in a way it's a harder, it's not an easy path. But everybody can do it. And the Buddhists say they are the ultimate hedonists. You talked about hedonism because they are about true joy, true happiness, which and Buddhism is about going beyond suffering. So, anything that's related to the ego is initially, for a short period of time, very gratifying. But then the ego is always looking for the next shiny, object. And, the ancestors say it will be given to you according to the measure of your humility. Jesus said, the meek will inherit the earth. I think he was talking. That's why the Bushmen are so advanced spiritually. They don't have all this crap around them that we have, our education and our preconceived ideas, the things that you were talking about as well. It will be given to you according to the measure of your humility, the measure of your love. That's not love as an emotion or a sentiment, but as a commitment to others, seeing the divinity in others, and the measure of your faith. And that's available to everybody. Nobody's excluded from it. And you can get it through AA, and you can get it through in a Buddhist monastery, and you can get it in Zen, and you can get it in Sufism, and you can get it in Kabbalah. But it's going outside of the box, away from the norm, away from the attachment to the material. Steve Jobs said, our job at Apple is not to give people what they need, it's to tell them what they want. And that's what's going on with us. We've been manipulated. We're being told constantly what we want, not what we need. If we were copied the Bushman model, if you think of survival, we need clear air, we need oxygen. The rules of 3 minutes without oxygen, your brain is dead. These rules are sort of, up for grabs. 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and 3 months without any human contact. Those are what we need. And then, of course, we need shelter and we need fire, but everybody wants something else. And that's, I think, what takes us away from it. If we just tended to our needs and not our wants, we'd be fine. It's not that difficult.
And those wants are so seductive.
Yeah,
Always out there and we're always chasing them and then they don't last and we look for the next one. And
yeah.
it really is the root of addiction as well. This
Hmm.
didn't work. I need more, more,
Yeah.
more.
Mm.
So at this point in our life, everybody, we have a lot more freedom, most of us, than we used to have. We have more time and more choice about how we use it. And one of my recent guests was saying he was really inviting people to push themselves a little bit to take that next adventure, to just stretch. And this might be something that you want to explore, to investigate, as Dr. Cumes is advising, what that process is all about. Do the reading, do the familiarization with it, get comfortable with the inevitable so that it can be something that you welcome rather than something that you're going to try to outrun and you're not going to be able to run fast enough, not ultimately. That's my invitation for today. And Dr. Cumes, thank you so much
Oh,
for,
you're so welcome. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Yeah.
and thank you to everybody who's joined us today. We'll see you again next time. Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, is sponsored by Sensationally Silver, a complete hair care product line created especially for people with hair like ours, naturally gray and white hair. Sensationally Silver products can be found exclusively at sensationallysilver.com.
Sensationally silver, because you are.